Hi guys, how are you? I'm Ali and I'm back again. And before I begin my today's lecture, I just want to quote from Batman. Life doesn't give you seat belts. The reason I brought this quote up from Batman is because seat belts is kind of a control, and today we're gonna study security controls. By now, you guys must have the idea that cybersecurity doesn't make an organization money. What it does is it helps with the business risk management of the industry or an organization or company. So implementation of cybersecurity is the responsibility of the IT department, and there are many ways of thinking about how IT service should be governed to fulfill overall business needs. So there are some organizations that have developed IT best practices or industrial best practices, or you may call them as frameworks. And what framework does is it shapes the company policies and provides checklists of procedures, activities, and technologies that should be ideally in place. An example of one of those would be NIST. So, so thing about frameworks is that when you are implementing a framework, not all of the checklists of the framework will be fully implemented in your organization. So you have to look for like which ones should you pick and which ones you cannot apply. So you need, when you are implementing frameworks or best security practices, you also need to look and take in consideration your own organization business needs. So all those frameworks and best industrial practices, they all deal with the selection of control. And actually cybersecurity is mostly about selection and implementation of security controls. So what is a security control? Security control is a countermeasure designed to make a particular asset or information more secure, keeping in mind the CIA triad of the security: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Talking about controls, they are like different types of controls, and what actually NIST did. NIST released a publication with the name FIPS 200 and NIST Special Publication 800-53, and in that publication, NIST tried to group different controls into 18 different families, or you may simply say 18, and they try to group controls into 18 different families, and those controls were based on their type and function. Here is a list of the 18 different control families published by NIST in that publication. So let's say that there is an access control. So let's say you place a firewall and that restricts certain users from accessing certain websites and allows certain users, or let's say executive users, to use certain sites, to access certain sites. This is the and in that scenario, according to NIST, the firewall will come in access control. Let's say the second family is audit and accountability. So you have a control such as a log management solution or a SIM solution. So according to the criteria of a NIST, that control would fit in the family of the audit and accountability. And let's say we have a configuration management that deals with the patch management and configuration management. So if you have a Windows SCCM or IBM Big Fix or any other patch management solution, that would come in that would come under the configuration management. So so that's how NIST try to define controls. So please take a minute and try to try to see those controls, but don't worry, you won't be asked about those controls in the exam. You just need to know that there are 18 different types of controls and how controls can be grouped. After defining those 18 different families of control, next NIST did was it tried to categorize those 18 different controls into three different control families. Here is a chart of the controls. Here we have 18 different families, and those families are then classified as three different controls: technical, operational, and management. And earlier we discussed about how firewall is a access control, and since firewall is a hardware, it's an that's why it's a technical control. Technical controls come deals with the hardware or software or or a device or an equipment rather than people or management. So we have access control, and that comes under technical. Next we have is awareness and training, and awareness and training it deals with the people rather than the hardware. So awareness and training or security drill would come under operational because it deals with the people. Next we have is audit and accountability, and we talked about the log management tools and SIM solution. Those tools would come under technical control in the next class publication. So please uh, pause this video and have a detailed look at this chart, and when you are ready, start the video. Apart from NIST classification of controls, there are various other ways that we can classify controls. And since we are studying CompTIA CISA Plus exam, and CISA has also its own classification of controls, and these are physical, logical, and administrative. Physical controls uh, such as alarms, gateways, and logs that deter access to premises and hardware are often classified as physical. Then we have logical controls implemented in operating system software and security appliances such as ACLs and intrusion detection system. Those would be logical controls. And then we have administrative controls that determine the way people act, including policies, procedures, and guidance, such as your organization security policy. We have studied how controls are grouped into 18 different families and then into classes by NIST and how they were classified by CompTIA. Next, how can we group controls not by their type but by their goal? So, so controls can be grouped again, classified into different types based on their goals. First, we have preventive control. Prevent a control physically or logically restricts unauthorized access. A directive can be thought of as an administrative version of preventive control. So let's say that what is preventive control? When you decide to use a preventive countermeasure, you want to prevent a malicious action from occurring by blocking or stopping someone or something from doing or causing. So example for such type of control would be a firewall, intrusion prevention, or IPS, security guards, biometric access control, encryption, video surveillance, fences, strong authentication, locks, man traps, antivirus systems. Those type of controls would come under preventive control. Then we have deterrent control. The control may not physically or logically prevent access, but psychologically discourage an attacker from attempting an intrusion. So an example would be like would be security guards, dogs, lights, video surveillance, alarms, or some kind of a warning or notification message when someone is trying to access a restricted website, things like that. The next we have detective control. The control may not prevent or deter access, but it will identify and record any attempted or sexual intrusion. And in that we have IDS, intrusion detection system, alarms, lights, motion detectors, security guards, video surveillance, logs and audit trails. And talking about logs and audit trails, SIM solution, security event and management would come under detective control. Next we have is the corrective control. And honestly, I don't recall what I have written here. So, in simple words, a corrective control is a type of control that attempt to get the system back to a normal state after an incident. So, next we have compensating control, and a compensating control does not prevent the attack but restores the function of the system through some other means, such as data backup or alternative sites. So let's say that the cost of a control is too expensive, or it's impossible to prevent prevent some incident from happening. So you all you can do is implement a compensating control. So let's say that example for that would be, let's say that you have some kind of a web application, and that has some kind of a vulnerability, and that is a critical vulnerability that can be exploited. And right now there are no patches or fixes for that vulnerability, but what you can do is you can segment or protect it by a firewall. So in a way, it is a kind of a compensating control because so yeah, in a way it is a kind of a compensating control because you are not trying to fix the problem. The problem is updating a patch, but since there are no patch releases or fixes for that problem, so what you can do is try to compensate the vulnerability by implementing a compensating control. COA, course of action matrix. It is actually a matrix that maps a control against a threat, exploitation, or a kill chain. And don't worry, we will study kill chain in detail. But for now, know that kill chain is a step or process in which an attacker completes an attack. So he wouldn't just go and start attacking. He would complete certain phases in order to complete an attack. And normally, a strategy would be he would first do recon attack, then he would prepare his then he would do weaponization, then he would try to deliver the attack, then he would try to exploit it, and then after exploitation he would do the installation of command and control channel. And after the command and control channel installation, he will try to communicate with its C2, and then he will try to complete its objective after objective. So keeping those phases of a kill chain or an attack in mind, the course of action matrix tries to identify a control against its face. So let's say that we have a recon attack, and we can place certain controls against a recon attack, and that would be talking about detective controls. We can place web analytics or we can place a firewall that can try to stop the recon attacks. Then talking about weaponization, we can place NIDS, network intrusion prevention systems and detection systems, and in deny we can place SNPs. Then in case of a delivery, we can have a trained security staff, security analyst that is monitoring for the alerts, and a vigilance user can try to detect it, or we can simply deny the delivery of an attack, or we can just disrupt it with inline antivirus. So try to understand those course of action metrics and the controls, how they would be placed in a phase of a kill chain. Don't worry if that doesn't make sense, because we will study this slide again in the future with detail. I would like to remind you that remember that no single control is likely to be invulnerable. It is helpful to think of them as delaying or hampering an attack until the intrusion can be detected. The efficiency of a control is measured by how long it can stop an attack. Another thing about control is that uh, whether to select or implement a control, it will depend on few factors: whether the control is a part of a framework or best industrial practice, or required for a regulatory or compliance requirement. So, you will need to take that in consideration. Or if you are trying to implement a control, you need to take in consideration the cost of control, both in terms of its acquisition and ongoing maintenance and support. And you will also need to take into consideration that the level of the risk that the control is going to mitigate. So whenever you are uh, implementing and selecting a control, you need to keep these three uh, keep these three things in mind. So next we have risk evaluation. The risk is a product of two factors. It's likelihood. Likelihood is the probability that a risk can occur, or a risk will occur, and its impact. And impact is may be determined by factors such as the value of asset or the cost of disruption if the asset is compromised, or the goodwill of a company. So to measure risk, all you need to do is multiply the probability or likelihood with its impact or loss. So risk can be measured by two ways. The first one we have is quantitative risk assessment. Quantitative risk assessment aims to assign concrete values to each risk factor, and we calculate quantitative risk assessment by an equation in which we multiply a single loss expectancy with annual annualized rate of occurrence. So, what is single loss expectancy? The amount that would be lost in a single occurrence of a risk factor. Uh, this is determined by multiplying the value of the asset by an exposure factor. An exposure factor is the percentage of asset value that would be lost if a risk would occur. And next we and an annual loss expectancy is the amount that would be lost over the year course of a year. This is determined by multiplying the SLE by the annual rate of occurrence. So this this is the equation. Annual loss expectancy is equal to single loss expectancy multiplied by annualized rate of occurrence. And the second method of calculating the risk would be qualitative risk assessment. And in this method, trying to assign some accurate values to the assets and the risks. What we do here is we try to seek out people opinion of which risk factors are significant. So let's say that assets and risks may be placed in simple categories. For example, assets would be categorized as irreplaceable, high value, medium value, and low value. And risk could be categorized as one-off or recurring, and as critical, high, medium, and low probability. Another method of this qualitative approach would be the traffic light impact grid, which I have shown in the slide below. For each risk, a simple red, amber, or green indicator can be put into each column to represent the severity of the risk, its likelihood, cost of control, and so on. So this approach is simple but gives an immediate impression of where effort should be concentrated to improve the security. So this is it for today. One exam tip would be that in an exam you could be asked about uh, uh, to identify which risk or which threat should be remediated quickly, and those questions would be based upon the common sense. And let's say that you have three or two critical assets. Let's say that you have two or three assets, and one of the asset is defined as a critical, and it has some vulnerability. So it's definitely makes sense that you would try to fix the asset that is critical. You would try to fix it first because your business depends on it, rather than fixing an asset that has a low impact in the organization. So in exams, you got to you may be asked about those questions, that in which type of asset you try to fix first. So this is it for today. I know that it was hell of a boring lecture today, but remember that once a triple A AAA rated agent said that boring is always the best. So have a nice day. And if you have any questions, let me know below in the comments. Peace out.